If you show up alone again this time, I swear I'm setting you up with the neighbor's daughter. She just got divorced. You two would be perfect together." His mom's voice crackled through the speakerphone, half joke, half threat. Callum Reed held the phone in his hand, resisting the urge to let out a long sigh. He was standing in the kitchen, a half-full mug of coffee still steaming in front of him. Outside, the sun had just broken through after a night of heavy rain. It was supposed to be just another normal workday, until his mom called. "Ava's wedding is the event of the year. You're her only brother, and the only one in the family showing up alone. Is that really how you want to walk in?" Callum didn't say anything. He knew his mom meant well, but every time the family got together, the fact that he came solo always turned into some kind of failure to discuss. He'd been divorced for 2 years now. No scandal, no tears. Just two people who'd hit the end of the road and decided to part ways like grown adults. But to the extended family, it was still a reason to frown. To his mom, it was a quiet regret. "You don't have to bring a girlfriend, just someone so people will stop asking," his mom went on. "Do you have any close female friends?" "No," Callum answered, maybe a little too fast. There was a pause on the other end, then her tone shifted, softer. "You know why I worry, right? Are you okay?" He gave a small smile, even though no one could see it. "I'm okay, Mom. I just don't like being put under a microscope, that's all." After the call, Callum stood in the kitchen for a long while. He didn't like being pressed about personal stuff. He didn't think anyone needed to be part of a couple to prove anything. But he got it. This was his sister's wedding, a family event. And once again, he was about to be the guy who came alone in a crowd full of hand-holding couples. That afternoon, during a virtual meeting with the company's tech team, his phone lit up with a message from Owen, his best friend since college. "Word is Ava's wedding is coming up. You pulling the solo act again or what?" Callum texted back, still thinking. 3 seconds later, Owen replied, "Hire someone to go with you, like how directors bring dates to award shows. You've got the money." Callum almost laughed, but then he paused, not because the idea was too ridiculous, but because, weirdly enough, it didn't sound that crazy. He opened his laptop, planning to get back to the reports from the health tech startup his company had just invested in. But his mind kept drifting, circling back to the all-too-familiar scenes from past gatherings, the pitying looks from aunts and uncles, the relentless questions. "When are you getting married?" Still no one knew? Or do you maybe have a different preference? He was never good at handling those kinds of questions. And honestly, he was tired. Tired of explaining that he wasn't ready, hadn't met the right person, didn't feel the need. This time, he didn't want to go through it all over again. Not entirely out of pride, not just for the family, but because he needed some quiet. Someone next to him, just to make everything feel normal. For everyone else and for himself. 3 days after the call with his mom, Callum still hadn't figured out a solid plan for the whole wedding date situation. Every time he went online, escort-for-hire sites flooded his screen, ranging from high-end companions to mass-market services. But he dismissed them all just as fast. It felt too fake, too easy to see through. His family wasn't stupid. They noticed everything. Every glance, every awkward pause, every offbeat response. One slip was all it would take for the whispers to start. Callum didn't want that kind of lie exposed. And more than that, he didn't want to bring a total stranger just to deceive everyone. What he needed was someone who knew how to keep a respectful distance without being cold. Someone polite but not robotic. Someone sharp enough to play the role without needing a script. The problem was, he had no idea where to find someone like that. And then, during a work meeting, something unexpected gave him a new direction. That day, Callum visited a nonprofit his company was funding. The partnership revolved around a mental health tracking platform for teens, an issue he cared deeply about after losing an old friend to long-term depression that no one had seen coming. The meeting was short but professional. After the presentation, Callum was given a tour of the office. His guide was a woman in her early 30s, hair tied low, composed stride, and eyes that held steady contact when she spoke. She introduced herself as Lena Quinn, assistant to the executive director. Unlike others who tended to be overly careful or overly flattering because of his name, Lena was direct. No sugarcoating, but not rude either. When he asked about the challenges they faced, she didn't dodge. She answered honestly, short-staffed, high pressure. But they kept going because they believed in what they were building. Callum listened, nodded, and then caught himself watching her as she gently motioned for a visibly stressed coworker to pause and get some water. A small gesture, but full of quiet care. When the tour ended, Lena shook his hand, offered a small smile, and wished him a good day. The moment passed quickly, but lingered longer than he expected. That night, while checking over the wedding itinerary, her image flashed in his mind. Not because of her looks, not because of sweet words, there hadn't been any, but because of the feeling, calm, steady, and real. His first thought was, no way. The second was, why not? It took him 3 days of going back and forth before he found her work email in the partnership files. He sent a brief, polite message inviting her to lunch to talk more about a new funding proposal. They met at a low-key restaurant near the nonprofit's headquarters. Lena arrived right on time, still in a white button-down and dark slacks like last time, but this time, she seemed a little more at ease. Callum greeted her. They sat down, ordered food, made small talk about the project. 30 minutes in, and Callum still hadn't gotten to the real reason he'd asked her there. He wasn't the type to beat around the bush, but this time, he was genuinely unsure of how to start. It wasn't until the server brought dessert that he finally set down his glass of water, took a deep breath, and looked her straight in the eyes. I know this is going to sound really weird, but I hope you'll let me finish before you judge. Lena set her spoon down and looked up, calm as ever. I'm listening. I have a family event coming up, my sister's wedding, and, he swallowed, everyone's expecting me to bring someone. And you don't have anyone? The question came out light, casual, but it hit dead on. Callum nodded. I mean, I could go alone, like I always do, he went on. But I'm tired of having to keep explaining that I'm fine, that I'm not lonely, that there's nothing wrong with me. I know this sounds crazy, but I thought, maybe you could help. Lena tilted her head. You're saying, I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend. Just for 2 days, nothing more. No awkward intimacy, no deep lies. Just your presence, someone normal, next to me, so I'm not the center of every family conversation. Lena looked at him for a few seconds, then let out a quiet laugh. Not mocking, not sarcastic, just couldn't help it. That might be the strangest offer I've ever gotten, she said, still smiling. Think I'm crazy yet? Not yet. I think it's interesting. You don't think it's too much? No, Lena said, her voice dropping a little. I get what it's like, having to live up to what everyone else expects. Sometimes pretending is easier than explaining. Callum leaned back slightly and exhaled. For the first time all week, he felt a weight lift off his chest. And for the first time, the thought crossed his mind that this crazy plan might actually work. Callum couldn't remember the last time he'd been this tense, waiting for an answer. Their conversation had ended with a polite smile, and Lena's, I'll think about it. But her eyes had given away nothing. She hadn't said no, but she hadn't said yes either. And he had no idea whether that was a good sign or a terrible one. 2 days later, she texted him, short and straight to the point. If you're still serious about the offer, I'm free tomorrow after 5. He started typing, absolutely, then deleted it. Rewrote, thanks, I'll pick you up at 5:15. They met again at a quiet little cafe tucked into a residential neighborhood. Lena was as composed as ever, but this time she walked in with a different look, no longer surprised but appraising. She sat down and skipped the small talk. Why me? You don't have a closer female friend? Or someone you used to date, someone easier to ask? Callum nodded, as if he'd been expecting that question all along. I do, but I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I don't want to owe anyone emotionally. I'm not looking for a real relationship. I just need someone to help me get through those 2 days. Help in the strictest sense of the word. And you seem like the only person who could keep things that clear. Lena took a sip of water, eyes steady on him. You don't think I'd be misunderstood? No. Callum replied without hesitation. I think you're direct enough to shut that down before it even starts. She gave a small nod, then reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. On it were 3 handwritten conditions. 1, no physical affection. No holding hands, no hugs, no kissing. 2, separate rooms. 3, if anyone finds out the truth, you take full responsibility, and I'm not getting dragged into any mess. Callum skimmed it once, then looked up and nodded. I agree. Lena tucked the paper back into her bag. And one more thing, she said. I'm not taking any money. If I do this, it's not for payment. Callum paused. You're helping me for free? Not exactly, Lena replied. I want you to make a donation to the organization I work for. Any amount. but it has to be enough to make you stop and think for at least a full minute before you hit send. Callum smiled. That's an interesting deal. This whole thing is far from normal, Lena said, her tone firm. If I'm going to be part of it, I want it to create something good, something real. Callum looked at her. It took him a moment to realize he was sitting across from someone who didn't want anything from him, except honesty and a little bit of decency. No one was taking advantage. No one was bargaining with emotions. It felt strange and freeing. He held out his hand. Do we have a deal? Lena shook his hand. Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't probe. Just steady, like she was simply acknowledging that she trusted him to keep his word. Callum walked out of the cafe feeling nothing like he had when he walked in. At first, he just wanted to hire someone to shield him from questions. But after that conversation, he realized what he was getting wasn't just a temporary plus one. It was someone who could draw a clear line between fake and real. And someone like that was rare. Almost a week after their lunch, Callum was behind the wheel, driving toward the coastal resort hosting the wedding, with Lena in the passenger seat. The southern shoreline stretched wide ahead, waves rolling in steady under the soft sun. The resort wasn't flashy or extravagant, but everything about it was neat, polished, and quietly upscale. Just like his family. Even from the entrance, a welcome banner with a giant photo of Ava and her fiancé was already visible. The groom-to-be, a lead physician at a major medical center, was the kind of man the whole extended family had jokingly nicknamed the national son-in-law. Ava looked radiant in every shot. And the future brother-in-law? Effortlessly sharp, like he'd walked out of an ad for health and stability. Callum stepped out of the car and held the door open for Lena. She wore a light blue dress, simple, nothing flashy, but perfectly suited to the setting. No one around them could have guessed that they'd only met 2 weeks ago, had never gone on a real date, and that everything they were about to do was part of an unspoken performance. But the moment they stepped into the venue, every eye turned toward them, more specifically toward Lena. His mom was the first to approach. She hugged Callum. She hugged him, then turned to Lena, eyes bright with excitement but laced with the quiet scrutiny only a mother could pull off. "And this is?" she asked, voice trying to stay casual, though her sharp gaze cut through like the midday sun. "This is Lena," Callum said. "We met a few months ago." It wasn't the smoothest delivery, but it was steady enough. Lena smiled and extended a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for having me." His mom shook Lena's hand, eyes still fixed on her face. "You're such a lovely girl. The two of you look good together." The word sounded harmless, but Callum knew better. His mom was scanning everything. Eye contact, body language, the distance between them. Lena seemed to pick up on it too. She didn't flinch, didn't lean into Callum for fake intimacy. She stood just close enough, calm, natural, believable. As his mom turned to greet someone else, Callum leaned in slightly and murmured, "You handled that like a pro." Lena just shrugged, like it was nothing worth mentioning. Throughout the welcome reception, she never once made him uncomfortable. She didn't try to charm anyone. But somehow, people kept gravitating toward her. In a conversation with the two most critical aunts in the family, she gracefully stepped back the moment things shifted toward comparing couples. When a younger cousin made a joke that went a little too far, she didn't blush or freeze. She tossed back a light quip that made the whole group laugh. Callum watched it all unfold with a quiet mix of awe and relief. Callum watched everything in silence. This wasn't what he'd imagined. He'd expected Lena would have to put on a show, play the part of someone smitten, clinging to every gesture. But she didn't. She was just herself, steady, composed, and completely at ease in a space that would have overwhelmed most outsiders. For the first time in years, Callum felt relaxed. Not because the questions had stopped, but because he wasn't afraid of being exposed. There was no script to stick to, no backstory to remember. All he had to do was stand beside her, smile when she started a conversation, nod while she talked about her work at the nonprofit, and occasionally toss in a comment or a joke that didn't feel forced. He found himself laughing more. Not out of obligation, but because things actually felt light. Lena didn't make him the center of attention. But she never left him on the edge either. She pulled him into conversations subtly, just enough so that anyone watching would assume, of course, they understood each other. By the end of the night, as they sat at a table overlooking the beach, Callum leaned in slightly and said quietly, "You're really good at this." Lena turned to him, head tilted. "Good at what?" Good at making everything feel easier. She smiled, then turned her gaze back toward the waves. I'm not trying to do anything, she said. I just think people deserve to breathe like normal human beings, not brace themselves every time someone looks their way. Callum didn't answer right away. He sat there in the quiet, and in that moment, he realized something. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped caring about what people thought. And a large part of that peace came from the woman beside him, the one he had once picked to be his shield. After the dinner party, the guests gradually drifted off, some back to their rooms, others out to the beach where a small bonfire was starting to crackle. The buzz of the evening had faded, leaving behind a softer stillness filled with scattered sounds, waves breaking in the distance, laughter echoing faintly from the back lawn, the quiet scrape of chairs on wooden floors. Callum and Lena settled on a quiet porch outside the room they'd been assigned, 2 chairs set side by side, facing a line of low trees at the edge of the resort. The porch light cast a warm, gentle glow, just enough to see each other's faces, but not enough to feel exposed. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. They were tired, but not in the drained, heavy kind of way. It was the quiet fatigue that comes after a long day spent being alert, careful, and keeping every word, every gesture, exactly in check. Now none of that was necessary. No more timed smiles, no more soft glances or perfectly placed touches. Just sitting there, like 2 people who had known each other for years, winding down after a party that meant more than the toasts ever did. Callum was the first to break the silence. Thanks for today. You made everything feel a lot lighter. Lena didn't turn to face him, eyes still fixed on the tree line. It's nothing. You're actually easier to be around than I expected. Callum let out a quiet laugh. That sounds like a half compliment. Because it is, she said, tone flat but not unkind. A few more seconds passed in silence. Then Lena shifted slightly, leaning all the way back into her chair. My dad went through depression after he retired. No one noticed. He just started fading out. No complaints, no outbursts, just stopped wanting to do anything. Callum didn't interrupt. He just listened. Lena's voice softened, her gaze lowering. It took us almost a year to really face it. And when we did, I realized how many people are carrying around damage that no one ever checks in on. That's why I do what I do now. Not because I'm a good person, just because I know how terrifying that silence can be. Callum sat up, fingers laced between his knees. I get it, he said quietly. Do you really get it? Callum nodded slowly. Yeah, because I spent almost a year not saying a damn thing. Lena stayed quiet, waiting. My ex-wife wanted kids right after we got married. I wasn't ready, not because I was scared of responsibility, but because I knew I still hadn't dealt with all the pressure from my family. I didn't want to repeat the cycle, having a kid just to check a box on someone else's timeline. When I finally told her that, she went quiet. 3 months later, she asked for a divorce. No fight, no drama. She just left. His voice wavered at the end, but he didn't look away. After that, people called me ungrateful, said I was afraid of commitment, said I failed because I couldn't hold a family together. They called me selfish, but none of them knew I never wanted to turn a child into proof that I had my life figured out. Lena turned to look at him. Her expression held no pity, no forced comfort, just presence. Fully there. Sounds like you actually do know what you need, she said quietly. Not exactly, Callum replied, but I know I don't want to fake it anymore. They sat in silence. No one reached for the other's hand. No heads rested on shoulders like in the closing scene of a movie, but something shifted, quietly, unmistakably between them. The space wasn't filled, but it no longer felt empty. The silence wasn't a wall. It was a shared room. Callum looked out into the distance. Lena exhaled softly. Neither of them tried to define the moment or steer it toward anything more. The night unfolded slowly, asking nothing, promising nothing. No roles, no lines to remember. Just 2 people, quietly edging closer. Not to each other, but to something truer within themselves. By the time the first light of morning broke, the soft sounds of cleanup had already begun to ripple through the resort. Staff moved chairs off the beach, folded up banquet tables, took down the last strands of string lights from the trees. Yesterday's picture-perfect wedding scene was now a faded echo, like a stage after the curtain has dropped. Callum and Lena packed up in silence. Not much was said, but everything moved smoothly. Folding clothes, checking for missing items, nodding polite goodbyes to a few relatives they passed along the way. Both dressed more casually than on day one, just like the air between them. Lighter now, unstrained, no longer weighed down by the need to perform. They were simply two people leaving after a major event, having pulled off a quiet act no one had seen through. Just before they reached the car, Callum's mother approached to say goodbye. She gave him a soft hug, no long speech, just a familiar squeeze. Then she glanced at Lena, who stood a few feet away on the phone, rescheduling her Monday meetings. "Son," she said gently, "is she real or just temporary?" Callum looked at his mother for a long moment, not because he didn't understand the question, but because he honestly wasn't sure he still knew the answer. Finally, he gave a small shrug. "I don't know," he said. On the drive back, they sat in silence for a long while. Lena slipped off her shoes and pulled her legs up onto the seat, the way she always did on long drives. Callum kept his eyes on the highway, but his mind was somewhere else, lost in his mother's gaze from earlier. Or maybe in that moment Lena had smiled softly at a child running across the reception lawn the night before. It was Lena who finally broke the silence. "We did well. I think they believed it." Callum nodded, still watching the road. "Yeah, but now I'm starting to question myself." Lena turned to him, a bit surprised. "About what?" He exhaled through his nose, voice low. "Whether I'm starting to believe it too." She didn't answer right away. One beat passed, then she slid her feet back to the floor and sat up straighter, as if needing a different posture to respond to what had just been said. "Maybe," she began slowly, "we just need to stop pretending." Callum glanced at her, but she kept her eyes forward. "And see," Lena continued, "if there's anything real underneath." The air inside the car shifted, not tense, not awkward, just still, in a way that held more weight than words could manage. Callum felt it deep. Those questions he'd spent so long avoiding were back again. But this time, not to accuse, just to wait. To see if he was ready to answer them. He still didn't know exactly what he wanted, but he knew one thing for sure: some things are worth pausing for, worth taking off the mask, worth looking straight at. Bookmark. The car kept rolling toward the city. No music, no goodbyes, just the question hanging between them. And two people holding it quietly, like something fragile and unnamed, but real. A week after the wedding, Callum still hadn't called Lena. Not because he forgot. Quite the opposite. He remembered everything. Every word she said in the car, the way she sighed when the wind slipped through the window, and most of all, the silence that followed her suggestion, "Stop pretending." Each morning, he woke earlier than usual, opened his email, scanned through work updates, then closed it again without replying to a single one. He'd never been indecisive, not with business, not with investments. But this wasn't something logic could solve. This ran on feeling, and for years he'd trained himself to ignore those. Now they refused to be silenced. On Saturday morning, he wired a large donation to the nonprofit where Lena worked, just like they'd agreed. No message, no company name attached, just a simple note from someone who once got help. That afternoon, he showed up at their office. No heads up, no scheduled meeting. He stood outside the old but well-kept building, hands in his pockets, shoes a little dusty from walking more than 10 minutes from the far parking lot. Then a door opened. Lena stepped out with a colleague, documents in hand, mid-conversation about the next quarter's budget. Her eyes swept past him, then paused. Looked again, just to be sure she wasn't imagining it. Callum didn't move. She excused herself and walked toward him, not rushed, not shocked, like this was something that could have happened any day, like maybe she'd already pictured it. He spoke first, voice low but steady. "I sent the donation, like I said I would." She gave a small nod. "I know. Thank you." He nodded back, then pulled his hands from his pockets and looked at her. Serious, no hesitation, no armor. "Last time you helped me hide from judgment," he said slowly. "This time, would you give me a chance to actually see you? The real you?" The wind moved gently through the trees behind her. Lena didn't answer right away. She held his gaze, steady and unblinking, as if weighing something that truly mattered. And then she smiled. No hug, no kiss, no grand sweeping gesture from a movie ending. Just a single sentence, soft but anchored. "Walk me home. I'll tell you about a project I'm about to sketch." Callum fell in step beside her. They left the brick path and crossed a quiet street, the late afternoon sun stretching their shadows ahead. No more pretending, no script, no promises. Just two people, starting honestly, the most ordinary and the most real beginning of all. Some relationships begin as a performance, but end up more honest than anything that was ever planned. Callum didn't need someone to fool his family. He needed someone calm enough not to rush into his life, but also strong enough not to leave once the roles were over. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop pretending with them. What about you? Have you ever met someone who made you want to drop the mask? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your story. And if this one hit something real for you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Small, honest pieces about love, loss, and quiet hope. Thanks for staying with me till the end. See you in the next video.